Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this week's FinTech Circle members event. I'm James, Head of Partnerships here at FinTech Circle. Pleased to welcome you all to this week's webinar, where we're going to be talking about what investors and customers look for, which founders often overlook. And to be covering this, I'm delighted to be joined by our guest speaker today, who is Caya, the co-founder and CEO over at SlideBean. Hi there, Caya. So if you're not familiar with SlideBean, they're one of our partner companies here. They use their expertise in design and strategy mixed with AI technology to help startups create powerful and impactful pitch decks. And Caya is also a successful entrepreneur himself, having founded SlideBean in 2013, and also hosts their YouTube channel, which I do recommend checking out if you haven't done so already. They've got some fantastic resources, free tips on creating slide decks, and also some industry tech analysis over on the channel. So the links to SlideBean's site and to the YouTube channel are posted, just been posted in the handout section now. So yeah, at this time, just before we hand over to Caya, just to remind everybody, we will be taking audience questions at the end of the session. So please do post your questions in the chat throughout the presentation, and we'll come back to those at the end. So Caya, thanks so much for joining us here today. Looking forward to hearing more, and over to you.
Awesome, thanks a lot for having me, man. I'm gonna scroll through the slides quickly. I love to interact, and I love to hear questions and kind of bring a discussion. You know, the idea here is to I'm gonna spitball a bunch of things that we overlooked as we were starting the business, and that hopefully work as good lessons for you guys to avoid the same mistakes. So let me get started now. Well, first of all, thanks for tuning in. Normally we actually do this webinar sessions like this for our customers, but partnership with FinTech Circle, you get some of my time as well. Just to remind you who I am, and not just a random guy standing here. So yeah, I'm the founder and CEO of SlideBean. We're a venture-backed company. We're 33 employees. We've been operating profitably since 18. And if we had a secret power beyond our product and our design skills and our skills and anything, is I think content marketing. We've really done well with that, and probably YouTube channel is the latest big breakthrough in that space. So today's webinar, we're covering a bit of a timeline and context just to get an idea of where we are and kind of like what stages we've been through. I think it provides a little bit of context to the mistakes or errors or stuff that we overlooked. Overlooks on equity, overlooks on fundraising and financials, and early customer acquisition. Give me just a second, sorry. There we go. Okay, so timeline and context of the company. So just to get an idea, we started the company in 2013. That was when we started and we launched our first beta. 2014, we did 500 startups. We launched the product for the first time. 2015, we raised our first round of venture capital. Started growing fast. On 2016, we raised another round of funding. We could call this like a seed round, kind of split in two. Slow growth in 2017, so we raised the money and stuff didn't work out as expected, and we had to kind of face a decision that a lot of companies have to face, which is, do we keep pouring every single resource that we have into growing faster to try and raise more capital, or do we dial back and become profitable? And we chose the latter, and I guess that's why we're still here. We probably wouldn't otherwise. In 2019, after we kind of went through that hoops, we became profitable again, and that has gotten us to where we are now. So SlideBean today is 33 people. We are diversifying into alternative branches and doing some other things beyond presentations, which was our original core product. We think that we finally found product market fit. So we think that we finally found the ideal customer, the combination of product, etc. So let's talk about these mistakes. Let's talk about the stuff that people overlook. First, we have the equity split. And I've seen this time and time again with the founders that I connect to. First, not agreeing on terms or salaries or the time dedication that you're going to put into the company. for example, if two founders agree that the company is going to be split 50-50, but then one of them gets a job or gets a job offer, like what happens then? What happens if somebody exits? Or what happens if somebody doesn't deliver for some reason? Can you fire your co-founder? You should be able to, but if you don't agree on what those terms could look like, on who needs to agree, on how many votes and so on, it can become very complicated. The general rule of thumb here is these legal complicated conversations, you should have them at a point where you're doing well, like when your relationship is good, because when your relationship is damaged, these conversations get more complicated and usually more expensive because they involve lawyers. Another common mistake I see is not defining a vesting period. So founders should agree on a period of vesting so that if a founder leaves, he or she gets to keep some of the shares, but also return some of the shares to the company so that they can be potentially reissued to somebody else. Very much related to that, if you're starting a company in the US, I'm honestly not sure what the legislation for Europe is. You want to file a document called the 83B election, and this is a huge red flag for investors if you haven't filed those forms. What it basically says is, you're paying taxes for your shares right away instead of when the shares when the shares increase in value, and it saves you a huge amount of money in those vesting periods and in the moment when you actually receive those shares. Legal, tax, complicated thing. The point is you absolutely have to file that, and you only have 6 months after the company gets incorporated to file the 83B. And if you don't, you sort of miss the train, which does suck. All right. Next up is fundraising and financial modeling. So obviously, guys, you guys are very financial focused. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the mistakes that I often see. I think the biggest question here is figuring out the money that you raised and how long will it last, and where does it get you to? You're probably potentially now pre-funded. You're raising money, and you need to raise that money with the idea of getting somewhere, and that somewhere needs to be a clear goal that lets your company become something else. So you want to ask yourself, where does this round get you? What happens then? And where does this round get you? What happens when the money runs out, or what happens after those 18 months? Are you profitable, or maybe have you raised another round? What metrics, and here's the important part, what metrics do you have if you intend to raise another round then? A lot of companies raise money without the intention of becoming profitable. That's a little bit of the startup approach. But you need to make sure that the money that you raise is enough to get the metrics that you need to raise the next round of funding. For example, in SaaS and subscription businesses, as an example, the metric needed for the next round of funding is a $2 million-ish annual run rate. So if your round of the money that you're raising only gets you to $1 million, you're falling short. You're not going to be able to raise any money, and investors can absolutely see that on the deck. And it becomes a bit of a red flag if the investor sees that the milestone that you're getting to is not a fundable milestone. Next up is what drives user growth, and this is more on the financial modeling side. I see a lot of financial models that, for example, have hard numbers, and they just say, well, we're going to get 100 customers in January, 150 in February, 180 and they just have hard-coded numbers into the model. I think that's a mistake in the approach. I think a much better approach, I have ideas for better approaches, but another mistake I see is assuming exponential growth. So instead of just doing those hard numbers that are maybe somewhat thought out, you're doing exponentials. So you're saying, well, we're getting 100 customers and we're going to grow 10%, and then 10%, and then 10%, and that curve really quickly becomes really high and becomes a little crazy. Another related error is assuming virality, or assuming that you're gonna get customers simply because they're going to refer your customers are going to refer others. That usually doesn't happen. So word of caution with that. Do's. So how do you overcome that when doing a financial model? First, you want to connect revenue to expenses. So don't think of revenue as just something that comes into the model with a flat number of employees. For every extra revenue that you make, you're going to need to hire extra people. Maybe it's support people. Maybe it's cost of goods sold. Maybe you need to buy kind of raw goods to produce them, and then that cost increases with revenue. The more revenue you have, the more expenses you have. But that counts for people as well. Again, support team is an example. Sales team and marketing teams are examples. Office staff is another example. So that number should scale with your revenue expectations on the model. So I think that's key. Another big recommendation into the philosophy of how we do financial modeling is that the revenue or the users or the customers or the growth should be led by the marketing and the sales budget in the model. So, one way to approach the model is to say, well, we're going to get, again, X number of customers every month, and that's what's going to drive our growth, which to me is kind of like a rookie approach to financial modeling. I think a much better way to do it is to say, well, we're going to spend $2,000 worth of marketing in the first month, and then we're going to increase that to $3,000, and then $4,000, and then $5,000. And how effective is that budget going to be? That's the question, right? You're spending the money, you're estimating that expense, which helps to project your financials and your expenses and how much money you need to raise. And maybe you become more efficient at acquiring customers. Maybe the first few customers cost you $300 each, but then next month that goes down to $250 each, and then that goes down to $200 each, and then that continues to go down. So if you're estimating that looks like a more realistic model, because what's driving your customer base, what's driving your customer growth is not just your idea of what growth you can get. It's a much more studied, metrics-based, expense-based estimation rather than just guesswork. In the end, it is guesswork. I think that's the important part. The financial model is guesswork. Your investor is not going to judge you on whether your financial model estimated $2 million in revenue and you only made $1.5. That's not the question here. The question is, do the financial estimations make sense? Are they estimating how much customers are really going to cost? Are these click-through rates, these conversion rates realistic? Are these expenses, are these scale-ups realistic? For example, it is unrealistic to say that in a month you're going to spend $50,000 worth of marketing, and then next month you're going to spend double that, and that it's going to be as effective. It's close to impossible to double a budget and to keep effectiveness. The more you spend, the more expensive your customers usually become. So the model needs to assume for that, and that's what investors are looking for: how well thought out, how much thought you've put into these estimations. Next up is early customer acquisition. So we get this question a lot now that we have a YouTube channel, and our YouTube channel is currently one of the biggest channels in the starter topics on YouTube. And we get the question, like, should we do YouTube as a marketing channel? And my answer is usually no. I usually think it's a bad idea, especially for early stage companies. Why? Because from these, and I'm going to let you see if we can do some interaction here. Tell me, which of these marketing channels do you think we should focus on first? I don't know if you want to submit that as a question. Maybe we have a little debate here. Which one do you think should go first, and why? Anybody? All right, I'll carry on.
Hi there, Caya. I'll go for social media.
Okay, so to me the answer is whichever channel gets you customers first. That to me is the idea, because in the earliest of stages you need to get customers as soon as possible. Validate your business. Validate if people are willing to pay for your product, if they're retaining, if they're sticking around with the product, if they're liking it or not, if they're using it or not. And content marketing and social media are both very, very slow channels. You can start doing it. It's free, if you will. It's free, but it'll take too long to kick in. So for an early stage company, you just can't afford that time. YouTube is by all means an extension of that. YouTube is content marketing plus social media a little bit, but it takes too long, and it's very expensive to produce content, to produce video content. So I wouldn't recommend it as a first channel. We only did YouTube until 2-3 years into when we had the company, and we already had a decent user base, and we already understood who the customer was. That's another variable there. You in the earliest of stages, you need to understand who the customer is. Late stage, you already know who the customer is, so you're thinking of different ways to find those customers. That's why. We'll have Q&A at the end, by the way, so if you want to submit any questions, do so in the little chat thingy. Okay, so next up is unit economics. So these are your unit economics, the cost of acquiring a customer. So and a common mistake where the business doesn't go in the direction of being profitable. And I see founders make this mistake. For example, I was talking to this company the other day that does these installations so they can track kids playing sports, and they can do kind of like replays and cool angles of a basketball game. And each installation costs tens of thousands of dollars. So the only way in which this could become profitable was if they either sold the installation to the school or to the gym, or if they built customers early on, but they weren't figuring out to do that. They were kind of thinking of focusing this on social media. So that the structure of this didn't make sense yet as a business, and you need to make sure that those economics kind of work and kind of make sense. So that's a little bit of what the financial model is supposed to do, definitely what the pitch deck should cover. So that the cost of acquisition, business 101, the cost of acquisition of a customer needs to be less than the cost of serving, starting over. Cost of acquisition plus the cost of serving a customer needs to be less than what you spend to bring them. Okay, so some other stuff. Just random, that they're not classified into any categories. First, toxic employees. This is a big stuff that we founders overlook. We've had that experience recently where employees who we had detected had a bad attitude, kind of like it's like a bag of rotten apples, right? If there's one, it extends to the others, and we lost other employees who were disengaged with the company, and we know that it sort of came from a toxic employee. It can have huge implications long term, and we work on this policy of hire slow, fire fast, and this is a saying that we've heard many times before, but it's very true. You should take your time to hire, and if you're detecting issues, don't be afraid to let people go. It's very painful. It's one of the worst things you have to do as a founder, but do not overlook how bad a toxic employee can affect the company. Next up is founder time. Founder time is precious in the company, and I've experienced this as our team has grown up. We're 33 people now, and I've become a bit of a bottleneck, and my other co-founders as well, where our time is limited and we can only help so many teams achieve so many of the tasks that they need. And if we don't, and if we're distracted on tasks that don't absolutely necessarily need our time, then we might be slowing other people down. So be very aware of your time, and don't do things that you don't need to be absolutely doing or focused on. Work-life balance, often overlooked, I think. I've learned, I've been with this company for 7 years. I've learned to balance that out by, for example, being super careful with my weekends, which are completely free and family time, and just kind of respect those rules unless there's a really, really extreme example. I think that's another one that's absolutely key. Build versus buy. I think this is one of the last ones before we jump into Q&A. We often want to think of saving money, and we think that we want to that it's cheaper to build a tool rather than pay for a tool, especially in this new SaaS world. Honestly, for the most part, it's probably cheaper to buy. So don't underestimate that. If you build something, you have to debug it and troubleshoot it, and only you know how to use it. And instead of kind of going with somebody who's built something really strong. To give you an example, Intercom, which is the tool that we use for marketing, mostly for customer support, a little bit for marketing and for user onboarding, we pay like $5,000–6,000 a month on Intercom. And we've tried a couple times to get rid of intercom and to kind of replace that with not even something that we built ourselves, but a combination of other tools. And which, yes, on paper, it looks cheaper to pay for these separate tools and have them do different parts of the process. But in reality, the integration of these saves you so much time. Like think of this in hours, and same with founder time. Think of how much an employee is costing you. If you guys are in Europe, I would assume that an employee is costing you what, 5, 6, 7,000 euro. You know, a manager level employee. Their time is really expensive. If they have to spend a week doing something, that costs you, you know, a couple, 1,000 or 2,000 pounds or 1,000 or 2,000 euro. Yeah, and it's cheaper if you buy something that's already built. So don't underestimate that part. And last but not least, to me, is talking to customers and talking to users. Another common overlooked matter. Like I, as a CEO, I still spend probably 3-4 hours a week talking to customers, and it helps me understand what their needs are. It helps me, it helps them kind of skip the line in giving feedback about the product and what's working and what's not working. So another one that's absolutely key. All right, so that's all I have. Sorry, I went fast through these slides. I want to get through everything and still have some time for Q&A.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Kai. That was fascinating. Really enjoyed that. So yeah, over to the audience for questions. Please do pop your questions in the chat. There's quite a few points that I think to pick up on, but I was quite interested where you mentioned about the use of metrics in the slides, but not using too many sort of hard financials. So I was interested in terms of what you've seen recently in terms of what are the metrics that matter most to investors? What are they looking for that's had a good effect if we're not using those hard financial numbers?
Good question. So it of course depends on the stage. If you're a seed stage company, what investors mostly care about is not so much your unit economics, because they're going to be early, but it's your understanding of these economics. They want to know that you're tracking this. They want to know that they want to make sure that you understand what's driving your growth and what could drive your growth in the future. If you're a later stage company, say Series A or something, Series A, Series B, then your deck is not so much about the product. It's much more about how you got here and showing a deep understanding of these numbers and a deep understanding of how pouring more money into these numbers, into these economics and these marketing channels or sales channels is going to drive growth in the end. And then, of course, a little bit on the future company vision, because that's a big question at all times, but especially in Series A, Series B.
Great, yeah, and in terms of what you guys have been seeing, working with startups, I guess I'd be interested to know. There's been a lot of changes in how decks have been put together during the pandemic, but I think particularly, you're all about creating slide decks that look different, that really capture investors' imaginations. Is there anything you've seen recently that any particular examples of startups doing things a bit differently that's worked particularly well and been very impactful with investors?
Coming in with that question, sorry, I lost you for a sec.
Sorry, yeah. So I was saying, is there anything you've seen, either trends or specific examples of startups doing things differently in their pitch decks that's had a really great effect?
Yeah, I think the general thought with a pitch deck is, you're summarizing a company's story. And I think that one philosophy that we abide by is, how do we tell a better company story? It's a little bit about the vision. It's a little bit about how you got here. I don't think there's anything new that founders are doing to get companies funded through their pitch deck. It's just telling a good story, summarizing their numbers. I guess that the big difference, it's not on the deck specifically, but just on the company. Starting a company has gotten a lot cheaper than before. If you wanted to start a company in 2000, you needed to buy servers and host your own thing. But now you have AWS. And so the money that you need to get traction to get your first customers is a lot less.
Sure, thank you. Just checking if we've had any questions in from the audience. Not yet. All right, well, maybe one more from me then. Just from your perspective as a founder, a couple of questions on the journey to this day. I was really interested in what you mentioned about, how you sort of, when you're hiring new staff, measuring revenue against new hires or new expenses. Are there any hires or particular roles that you feel that you found have been particularly impactful, or that you can say as an example where really added a lot of value to the business?
Yep. I have a good answer for that one. So normally a business needs a mix of skills to succeed, right? What's that mix of skills? We're talking a marketing person or a salesperson. Maybe they're the same thing. Maybe they're different. We're talking a product person, probably the CTO, the developer, and you need an operations person. So that's the magic mix of people team to get a company to succeed. I have this idea that the first company, the company team that's on the slides should be able to get the company to $100,000 in revenue without hiring anybody, or without bringing in any new skills. You have to kind of combine all of those. Mm-hmm. And I think that, at least in our case, we founders have kind of specialized in one thing or the other. I've specialized in marketing. My co-founders have specialized in product and a little bit on team management. So the quicker you can delegate these tasks, the better. And for us recently, we hired a new operations manager, which has been absolutely key to kind of offloading that part and letting us focus on the stuff that we do best.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to, as you mentioned, really trying to put a value on everyone's time, so that if you can bring someone in who's saving time off the management team, then that's going to make a huge difference. Yep. We've had a question in here from Jordan, which is, how valuable are your YouTube videos for customer acquisition, considering they're on various topics rather than strictly sales focused?
Great question. So there's this different. We have two series of videos on YouTube. The first series that we had some success with was what we call the Startups 101 series, which are videos that are super niche, super specialized on startup topics. So talking about pitch deck or convertible notes or how to raise capital, talking to investors. Who would watch that video? A company founder, somebody who's an entrepreneur who has their own company. And that's it. That's it. And the problem is that that's a niche audience. It's not going to grow as a 1 million subscriber YouTube channel. But they were very effective at moving people down the funnel because we were targeting very, very specific people, and we knew that all of them or most of them would eventually need one of our products. So that worked well. What we discovered was that we also became kind of greedy, or also kind of motivated by our talent making videos, I guess. And we figured, well, we want more people to watch our videos, and if we want that, I guess we need to increase our top of the funnel to make content that's more broad. And that's when we came up with the Company Forensic series, which is this broader covering companies that go out of business. And who would watch that? A customer of that company, or somebody who's interested in business. Maybe they're not entrepreneurs, so they're not our customers. They're not going to pay for SlideBean anytime soon, but they still enjoy the content. That was honestly a weird coincidence that worked for us, but it worked really well because now we have this huge top of the funnel. A lot of people know what the brand is, and they watch my face every week when the new video comes out. Some of them are entrepreneurs, so that's these videos are a good way to capture people to the next stage, which are the niche videos that we did first, and then we still do, and then eventually that they move down the funnel to the product. That's the weird combination, weird but successful combination that we've had on YouTube.
Right, and you mentioned that it took a long time actually before you even started on YouTube, and then even longer to actually get the impact. But it's great to see how successful the YouTube channel has been. That's how we found out about you guys as well. Just one quick question. We have a couple of minutes left. Question here from Chris. When raising in seed stage, no one tells you your valuation is too low. Do you believe when they say your valuation is too high?
That's a good question. I think that in seed stage, valuations are really a game of bargaining, a game of bets, like your sports bets. Like how risky is this bet, and what's the upside for me? That's really the balance. And at an early stage, you can't base a valuation on revenue because there's no way to justify it. You can't base a valuation on, you can base it a little bit on the market potential, but these are all imaginary things: market potential, capacity for the team to deliver. They're fugazi, if you will. So it's really a balance of how much the investor is willing to bet and how much they want in return, and that's what defines valuation. So is it too high? Is it too low? For a seed stage company that has $10,000 a month worth of revenue, I would say a fair valuation is in the range of $4, $5, $6, $7 million. I would say that that's a range that wouldn't raise any eyebrows. I would expect. If it's 15, I'd say that would raise eyebrows. If it's 2 or 3, I'd say that's pretty low. Of course, this depends on the country. I'm talking U.S. standards, but that's the general thought.
Fantastic. I think there's some more questions coming in, but unfortunately we're out of time. So thank you very much, Caya, for that. That was fantastic. Really great to learn more about SlideBean. If anybody wants to connect or follow you, what's the best place, apart from, of course, the YouTube channel? What's the best place to find you?
Yes. So most useful stuff coming from me is going to go on the YouTube channel. So go look up for SlideBean on YouTube. If not, if you want to shoot an extra question or have me around, you can follow me on Twitter. That my handle is Caya here.
Brilliant. Well, thanks very much for your time. Thanks to all our members for joining in, and we'll see you next time.
Cool. Thanks a lot for having me.
Cheers, Caya.